President Trump has proudly declared America is back in his first address to Congress since his re-election.
And to my fellow, we have been ripped off for decades by nearly every country on earth, and we will not let that happen any longer.
The speech was met by repeated protests from Democrats, showcasing the strong political divide running through America. And joining us live from Washington, D.C. is White House correspondent for Just the News, Amanda Head. Good morning to you. Plenty of theatrics in Congress yesterday, Amanda. What did you make of the speech?
You know, what I made of it was that the president had a number of victories that he was able to tout. And keep in mind, this is just today's day 44. So yesterday was day 43 of his presidency. And his previous record for this type of speech is an hour and 22 minutes. He beat it this time, clocking in at an hour and 39 minutes. And it was chock full. You know, this was not one of those rally type speeches of his where he throws in impromptu humor and exposition. I mean, he enumerated dozens and dozens of accomplishments so far. But, you know, I think the important thing is how the American people view the theatrics that took place on the Democrat side. Just a moment ago, you rolled some B-roll of Congressman Al Green, and CBS actually ran a poll afterwards, and it was an 80-20 issue in favor of, 80% said that it was inappropriate, 20% said that it was appropriate. And you look at the numbers, there was a CBS YouGov poll that showed that President Trump had 76% approval rating of this speech. On a CNN poll, it was 69% of people who had either a very positive or a somewhat positive view of what President Trump was talking about. And the mood was uplifting, it was hopeful, and it was forward thinking and forward looking.
OK, let's look forward. He has also defended the tariffs, of course, one of his big promises. The markets have taken a nosedive. People in America are starting to realise that prices will go up. What do you think is going to happen there?
Yeah, you know, I think obviously when you have a tariff type situation, you are going to have, like right now, we have Best Buy and Target who are saying, yeah, this is probably going to cause a little bit of a bump in our prices. But I think it's relatively ephemeral in the grand picture. And, you know, all of this is in an effort to help restart the economy, not necessarily the tariffs, but when it comes to inflation and what the American people suffered under the last presidency, you know, you can't just snap your fingers and say, okay, let's bring inflation down. You have to do things that naturally drive inflation to go down, and things like that are his energy initiatives. And on the tariff thing, you know, I think for a lot of economists, there's a larger conversation to be had about what the immediate or long-term goals are. But what the American people see is the fact that this president, even since his first term, has talked about bringing manufacturing back to our country with automaking, with pharmaceuticals, with practically every sector of industry. He wants to bring that back to U.S. shores. So for the American people, they hear two things when he talks about these tariffs. They hear American made and they hear reciprocal tariffs. And like I said, there's a longer conversation to have about what the effects of those tariffs will be with respect to the immediacy. But most Americans hear reciprocal tariffs and they think, okay, well, if they're taxing us this amount, then we should be taxing them the same amount. And it's just a common sense approach. And so much of what President Trump talked about last night, a lot of common sense initiatives. These are things that if Democrats were touting this, if it was Joe Biden at the dais, if it was Kamala Harris or Barack Obama at the dais touting these policies, they would be in support of it. And you need no further proof than some of the outside of the box ideas that President Trump had, like no tax on tips. President Trump floated this in the state of Nevada, which is a very, you know, hospitality friendly state. And then lo and behold, 2 weeks later, Kamala Harris ripped the policy. So it's a lot of common sense. And I think the American people showed in the polls that they approved.
Yeah, and look, we did see that share market actually take a dive yesterday, and that has been a metric of Donald Trump's. He's always pointed to that stock market. If it's doing well, he's doing well. It didn't do well yesterday. Thanks for your time, Amanda.